My name's Henri Kisielewski. I'm a photographer based in London. I think photography has a very slippery relation to truth. If something's in front of the camera, then by definition it was there, it must be real. But in reality, that doesn't give much context as to how the picture came to be made. I'm quite curious about the way that photography doesn't really explain anything, but it's really good at suggesting. And I thought it was sort of the relationship between the images and the space between them that would come together to add up to more than the sum of the parts. In that way, it's sort of like playing on photography's similarity to poetry, where the lines themselves don't say everything, but it's sort of the cumulative effect. So I really wanted to see if it was possible to shoot the world as it is and then make something that felt like fiction. The project was made entirely in Normandy during a 2-month photo residency organized by Planche Contact Photography Festival. And so for this project, it was a question of stopping people in the street and going to places where local news stories had been written, just capturing basically anything that caught my attention. So I would walk a lot and meet strangers, go into bars and cafes. The process of making the work was very much a process of letting chance do its thing. But because I had this notion of fiction in the back of my mind, I think I was attracted to specific people for what they could give off that was fictional. That sort of reminded me of this big fictional mess of images that we all have. And that can come from cinema, it can come from literature. And so at the beginning, I was very keen to stick to my own brief and shoot the real world as it is and then try to make something that was fictional. Then I thought it would be interesting to try to add layers of fiction to the brief itself. I think the minute you start negotiating with yourself, saying, oh, I don't need that picture, that's a sure sign that you should turn around and chase the subject and try to get the picture. So for example, there's this picture of triplets. I was attracted to them because something told me they were fictional, and that thing is obviously Kubrick's twins. And interestingly, Kubrick's twins were based on a picture that Diane Arbus took of twins. So there's this funny interplay between what's real and what's fictional. This crucifix overlooks the town that I was staying in, and I'd walked past it 100 times, never really thinking much of it. I thought it was a bit of a cliche to photograph something like that. Until one day someone in the area told me this story whereby a man was found dead at the foot of this crucifix. It turns out his son had killed him. I thought it's almost like biblically fictional. So it has this weird, eerie light to it. But I think it's an interesting part of the project. Some of the places were photographed because they have a real story attached to them. And so they might feel fictional, but they are real. And I was interested in sort of exploring that grey area there. This picture was taken one evening. I was pretty close to a beach, and there weren't very many people around. In the distance I saw this group of men, and one of them had this little waistcoat and a sort of handlebar moustache. So I walked over, and as I arrived in front of him, I noticed that one of his eyes was completely white. That is exactly what I was looking for. So I asked him if he'd play the bad guy in my sort of fictional documentary. And of course, as is often the case, he was really, really nice. This picture was taken quite late. The light was running out. So we only did 3 or 4 shots, but one of them worked out. It was a beautiful sunny day, and I walked back on this very long beach. And there were these 2 girls walking in front of me, and I asked them if they would be interested in taking some pictures. And they said to me that actually they were actresses, and they were preparing a play in which they would be playing a couple. So I asked them to pose as a couple. And because they're actresses, they know exactly what that means. They sort of very subtly shifted their facial expressions. And amazingly, I realized later on, once I got the film back, that the girl who was looking straight down the lens, because of the wind, she had a tear coming out of one of her eyes. It was one of those things that I couldn't have prepared. The idea of meeting actresses who are playing a couple, only having 2 shots of them, and in one of them there's a tear rolling down her cheek. It's amazing how generous the gods of photography can be when you're pounding the pavement and just working and looking all day long.